startup business, just really struggling. And when we went through this business, we definitely budgeted that it was going to be in a deficit for the first year.
Men, ego can get in the way. It can stop you from reaching out from help. It can stop you from taking advice because men in general like to give solutions, don't like to get solutions from others.
When the phone rings, your mind goes straight to, okay, I need to switch on here for a minute because that's my business lifeline.
One of the things that I notice first off, if somebody's looking absolutely haggard and beaten down, they're probably facing something that they need some help through.
I'm Greg Forzani with Forzani Business Education, and this is the More Profit, Less Stress podcast, where we provide insights for more profit and less stress in your business now with the purpose of turning it into a valuable asset. Okay, welcome to the More Profit, Less Stress podcast. I'm Greg Forzani, and my guests today, they're two business coaches who are also licensed using our curriculum. One of our guests today is Ron Farrell with Grounded Growth Coaching, and the other one is Todd Fife with Predictably Coaching. Okay, so today on the podcast, we're going to talk about men's mental health awareness. Men, ego can get in the way. It can stop you from reaching out from help. It can stop you from taking advice because men in general like to give solutions, don't like to get solutions from others. We're going to get into how to find support in your life, how to reach out to others and maybe pick up activities, maybe chop wood, maybe join some groups. And we're going to get into what are some of the signs people in your life, what are some of the signs you should look for, I guess, for men in your life who might be struggling with men's mental health that are business owners. So maybe just real quick, do fast intros. Ron, I'll start with you. Where are you located? What area do you work with clients? And do you specialize in anything in particular or you work with anybody?
Yeah. So located in southern Alberta, just outside of Cochrane, actually. So I'll deal with anyone in southern Alberta primarily, but really we're an online business so that we can deal with people in other areas as well. Background, I was an insurance agent and owner for several years and exited that in the fall. And as results, looking at acquisitions and things like that. So in terms of who I deal with, obviously people that just want to do better in their business, grow it, become more profitable, make some more money, but also prepare people for that exit. Because really one of the things that we're about is really promoting having a saleable or a valuable asset at the end of the day. So helping people to get the most out of their business when it is time to exit, and also can help with the acquisition side because I've been through that a few times as well.
Right. Awesome. Cool. Todd, how about you?
Well, I've been on the business side of my career since the early 90s.
This is before I met you. It's been a long time.
That's right. Yeah, I got into, my family had a retail business. And then, through that, I started paying attention to retail and wholesale. I ended up making a career out of the wholesale side of the business as a rep for many years and had the pleasure of working with many, many, many retailers with varying styles of retailing, some big box and department store style and all the way down through to the mom and pop stores. So that was a pleasure to be able to work with so many people and take a look at their businesses. I graduated out of the wholesale repping business and decided to stay at home a little closer to my kids while they were growing up. So we made some lifestyle moves and moved to a small resort town in BC for skiing. And I set up a real estate business and ended up buying a brokerage and running that for a good number of years. So I understand, certainly understand business ownership and real estate on top of wholesale and retail businesses. So now we've settled out of the mountains and over to the Vancouver Island on the coast in Comox, and looking forward to spending a little bit more time working with businesses on improving their predictability and maybe phasing back on real estate slightly to make my life more predictable.
Okay, so we all wanted to get together today because June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. It gets a lot of attention, and duly so, but we wanted to come at it today maybe from a little bit more of an angle of business owners. And you guys can chip in your thoughts on this, but I feel like, men bottle a lot up. Men want to provide. We have this instinctive nature. We want to provide for the family, which is great. That has its that comes with its stresses, and if it gets bottled up, then then those stresses can add up and really weigh on people, right? I think what doesn't get talked about much is with business owners in particular, it's like a whole nother layer of that pressure, stress, or responsibility on top. Because now I think it's not just provide for your family, but you get into providing, you feel like you got to provide for your team, right? And even as coaches, we own our own businesses. There's probably a third layer. Now we feel like we're responsible for our clients and their teams. So it kind of really weighs on you, right? And just, I think it'd be fun to maybe talk about that today a little bit and even get into some signs to look for with people. Like if some of the listeners connect with some of this themselves, great. Hopefully it helps. But even to talk to listeners to say, hey, there might be people in your life that own businesses that are going through stuff and maybe some signs to look for. From either of your experience, you see, well, I don't know, share your thoughts on that. Or if you see, maybe let's start with, from your perspective, why do men seem to want to, do you notice like why men seem to want to take on so much responsibility, I guess, maybe financial responsibility?
Actually, I think that that's kind of put on us by everyone around us as well. We do feel an obligation to so many people in our lives, but there's also an expectation on us that we should have it all together, particularly when it comes to business owners, because from the outside, people don't see the struggles within. And the reality is that something might look good to a third party, but the owner is struggling with some aloneness for sure, because who do you talk to? And not to mention the financial stresses that go with that.
Yeah, I think you're right, Ron. Although I think the perception that people are relying on us and putting that weight on our shoulders might be self-induced sometimes. We think that we're in charge of that portion, so we take it on ourselves. And, I know if my spouse was here and she'd say, well, what do you mean? I've never told you that you're the only one in charge of it. But
Right.
I think that there's a little bit of we have to take some responsibility for the independence of that thought as well. And, is it something that we just think is ours to bear? And for sure, we get buried in it, quietly buried in it. I know, for many years owning the real estate brokerage that I had, I became a different person. I became very focused on bottom line and performance and cash flow. And, just if things weren't going right there, it came right home with me. And I had to be careful what I walked into the house wearing. Sometimes I
Yeah.
had to go outside and sit on the tractor and burn some diesel and just come down off that day. But yeah, lots of pressure that we wear every day.
I was just going to say that your comment about going and sitting on the tractor and burning some diesel, one of the best things that we can do is just take a minute in whatever fashion that looks like. Could be chopping wood or doing yard work. It might be jumping on the bike and going for a spin. Just finding a way to reconnect with who we are outside of the office sometimes.
Yeah, it's a really good, as you were saying that, Todd, it's a really good, like Ron, I love you added that point, but that's a great point. We got to remember when you walk in the house, or if your office is in your house, when you walk out of there, like mine's in my house. So when you walk out of that, what are you doing to make sure you're not carrying all that load you just had on your shoulders into the family life, for sure. It's probably something men bottle more, where women will be more willing to just kind of come out and open up about it. And some people will say, hey, coming and dumping all your, if someone in the house comes and dumps all their stuff on you, it's like, oh, you just added more weight to my shoulders. But I guess if men can maybe take a page out of women's books of being willing to share that, I guess, what am I trying to say? Is men, it's almost like, I don't know if you two find this, but I find it like we're always told we're looking for solutions, right? So if our spouse shares the issues, we're like, okay, well, let's figure out a way to fix it. When sometimes it just needs to be dumped, right? And that's why we don't want to go walk in the house and then dump all the issues, because we're like, oh, then we're putting on their weight and they got to figure out the solutions. When in fact, for the most part, they aren't maybe looking to give us solutions. They just realize they got to listen.
Yeah.
It's an interesting.
Well, I've had that very conversation with Nicole several times, where she's just venting. She just wants to get it off her chest. Feels better afterwards. I don't,
Right.
because it lands right on my shoulders. I feel like I have to carry that weight.
Yeah, exactly.
I read an interesting part of an article the other day that talked about uniforms and why businesses and companies and organizations use uniforms. And, obviously one of them is so that the public can identify you as somebody in the business so that in a crowd they can pick you out, whether it's somebody in Walmart wearing a vest or a police officer or a firefighter. But it took it to the other side as well. And it talked about the fact that you're in a mindset when you put that uniform on and you're wearing that job, and you know that you're wearing the job when the uniform is on. And at the end of the day, when your shift is over and you take the uniform off, you're going through the motions of removing yourself from the job and putting yourself back into your civilian clothes, so to speak, so that you can return to the other part of your life. And I guess philosophically, if we did that without the clothing, but did it more philosophically and took ourselves out of our business when we walk away from it and put ourselves into the uniform of being a family person, we'd probably end up being a person that's more fun to be around.
Yeah, totally. Boy, you're making me think of two things. One, I've been contemplating from now on when I work, I might just wear like the more profit, less stress t-shirts or something. And you're making me think I should actually do that, right? So when work's done, the uniform goes off and then you know to unplug. It's like a trigger, right? Like a reminder. It's a great idea, actually. That's super good.
Do you
idea.
own any other t-shirts than those ones though?
Yeah. I'll wear those t-shirts after work and the more profit, less stress ones during work. It's a great idea though. And the other thing I heard the other day, I actually heard on a podcast where the guy said, like they'll have in the house, they'll designate family time where from this time to this time, phones are off, kids, adults, everybody, like you disconnect, right? Which is another version of what you're saying. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Men could learn from that for sure.
Yeah, you want to enter an industry where you're switched on all the time, take a run at real estate for a little bit.
I was just quiet a second ago because I was just thinking that was the industry you were in, right? Where you got to be on, like you can't turn, like I was thinking as I said that, turn the phones off. And I was thinking, you owned a real estate brokers, you probably weren't allowed to do, you were allowed to do that, but you probably felt you couldn't.
Oh yeah.
So
it's very difficult to shut it off. And after a little while, it becomes a part of you, that ringtone when it goes off, it's a little bit like Pavlov's theory. When the bell rings, you salivate. Well, when the phone rings, your mind goes straight to, okay, I need to switch on here for a minute because that's my business lifeline. So difficult to get away from that. And that's certainly one of the goals for me is to figure out how to step away from that somewhat so that I'm not 24/7 there.
yeah, it's a really good point. Have you noticed, like Todd, you brought up, so your wife would say, this is an interesting subject. You said your wife would say, hey, I never put the onus on you. That's on you. You did that yourself. I think that's worth talking more about because I wonder, like, I guess probably, families get together and in the beginning, they probably talk through this kind of thing. And well, first of all, probably most don't talk through this, but let's say
I was going to say that.
Yeah. So let's say they do talk through it. And they kind of talk through and come to an understanding of what that family, the dynamic's going to look like. And that's great. If they've talked through it, then there's an understanding. It's awesome. But yeah, I think to the point, probably most don't. So yeah, like if they don't, and men assume, I don't want to stereotype here, but we are talking about men's mental health awareness. But if one partner, so let's call it the man, because we're talking men's mental health awareness, just assumes like I got to provide, because it's instinctive. I'm wondering how many cases are just assuming, if they've never talked about it with their spouse, then maybe their spouse doesn't see it that way, but the guy's still got that pressure on himself.
Yeah, I think I've joked with my wife. We've joked all along as we've been parents, it's really easy to have babies. There's generally no manual that goes along with it.
They aren't born with a manual.
They are not. I checked.
And there's not one manual that works for all of them.
So similar to that, to raising children, entering a relationship and figuring out how to split off the responsibilities and the stresses and that. Again, there's no manual to that. Some people figure it out. Other people just settle into the routine or the default positions. And I guess we could relate it all back to business too and say, a lot of people can get into business and not really have a manual on how to do it. They just settle into a default way of doing it and create that habit. So for me, I know that I created the habit. My default was I'm quietly carrying a business here that's producing income for my family, and I need to keep this thing working the way that it is. And I can't bring it home and share it and look for help from other people. I've just got to do that and then go home and be a dad afterwards. I think it happens on many different levels in our lives. Yeah, all the way from raising children to owning a business. I think there's no manual there. There's no right or wrong, but a lot of the times we adapt the wrong way. It affects us mentally, for certain.
Yeah, for sure. Makes me think you go back to Ron, you had said, well, I mean, even Todd said it too, actually, both of you said it, but like figuring out activities, whether it's a hobby, a sport, or even just like you said, chopping wood. That was actually a good suggestion because that's also a physical activity. And if there's anything you got to vent out, it's great to vent it out on the wood.
Exactly.
Because then you get to burn it after.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Without question. I had a conversation yesterday with a guy that I was mentoring this past year, and startup business, just really struggling. And when we went through this business, we definitely budgeted that he was going to be in a deficit for the first year. But the money is still a real big issue for him. The thing is that his wife is his partner, and that strain on the relationship has just been brutal in the last few months. That's another thing that we've got to think about, particularly with business owners and new business owners, especially that, if you're struggling, it's going to affect your relationships. And those are the people that are supposed to be helping to lift you up, to get you through it. Right. And sometimes that's exactly the opposite of what happens.
Because you can't come home and, for lack of better words, vent about the business because your spouse is also your business partner. So that just makes things. Yeah, I totally get it. It actually, sorry, I got to give coaching a plug here for just 2 seconds because what you just said, that's why it's so important to, even if you're going to lose money and it's part of the plan, which is for every new business, you got to have clarity about how much, like you got to build a proper budget so you know how much you're going to lose for how long. Like I know my wife and I, we moved to the U.S. and the way we moved to the U.S. was to buy in a business. We built a detailed budget and we knew exactly how much money we were going to lose and for exactly how long. And that way, and then we, made sure we had that money put aside. And, tip for anybody listening to this, boy, that helped us unbelievably. Like that, the very first month we owned the business, we lost like over $10,000. So, that's no fun to bring home and talk about after work, right? Like it's stressful, but we knew we were going to do that. And, we planned 18 months. I think we lost money for 15 months or whatever, but it wasn't that part. The financial part wasn't nearly as stressful as it could have been because to your point, we built that budget. We had that clarity. We put that money aside. We knew how long it was going to last. That helps a lot. I know we kind of already talked about this, but I would like to go back to it because I think it's a really helpful piece of advice. You both cut a little bit on it, like, hey, go sit on the tractor or go cut the wood, because you guys are business coaches. You've also been business owners and business owners currently. But what advice would you give to the male business owner that's saying, but you guys, you don't understand. My situation is different. I don't have the time to create a hobby or a sport or whatever it is. I just don't have the time. I work all day and then I got to come home and then I got to bottle it up because I don't want to tell my wife. I don't want to tell my kids, and they just keep bottling. What advice would you give them to get out of their own way to figure that out?
Yeah. Having spent so many years in the captain's seat, driving a business and, driving the brand and the leadership of the business, and you're the boss and you're the HR department and you're the finance department, and all roads lead to you, and you're expected to be the answer department. So when somebody comes to you, they need answers. And it became important to me, and I really didn't discover this until late in my career, maybe too late in some cases, where I needed an audience, whether it was one-on-one or a group of like-minded people, where I could go and not be the answer guy, but seek answers.
Right.
And talk to people that had similar problems, or they were in similar situations where they owned a business or they had similar problems, and then we could discuss how we were moving through the day of having to be the answer department and then transitioning to being more of a family person and switching on love and compassion and all of the rest of the things that we need to exercise those muscles as well. And without talking about that with other people that are in a similar situation, I was lost for a long time, where it was like, okay, I've got to bottle that and leave it on the shelf there and then come home and try to open the family bottle and play in there for a little while. But I had too many bottles on the shelf that I was trying not to
Not
mix.
dealing with.
Yeah. So finding that group of people, and I'll circle back to your coaching plug there, somebody that can understand the fact that you've got these problems that are going on here, but how do I set them aside long enough so that I don't lose the humanity side of me to be able to go home and participate?
Todd, was that a mastermind group or something like that?
Yeah. It came, and it wasn't an organized mastermind group, but it came more from a professional group of people that slowly became friends because they started sharing things with one another. And then I think men in business and friendship struggle as well, because carving out the time in your life for all of the business that you do, for all of the family time that you need to do, and then where how much time do you carve out for friendships outside of those two things, where you can just seek something else that you need. Because that part gets ignored by men so often, I think that's also an area where we're not sharing and unloading some of that garbage that we needed to unload before we got home to our families. So it's those personal friendships that you can say things to those friends where you couldn't say it to your customers or staff, and you couldn't say it to your family at home, but you needed a room to say that in, where it wasn't going to be taken the wrong way. Be kept in that room. So honestly, I probably tripped across that by accident, but I was lucky I found it. I think, Greg, back to your point again a second time, the role of a coach in your business, or a mentor, as Ron put it, can be just that. It's like, okay, I'm here to speak on behalf of your business, but if you've got some baggage that's getting in the way, let's get through that and talk about it, and so that you can move on.
So to your point on that, I love the idea of the mastermind type group. There's been a number of groups that have popped up around here that focus on men's mental health. One of them is called the Brothers Path. And it was formed by actually a friend of mine who had lost four brothers to suicide over the years, actually within a very, very short period of time and whatnot. But the thing that I'm finding about these businesses, or pardon me, these groups of mental health, is that the people it's attracting are not necessarily the caliber of a business owner, and the support that you're getting is not necessarily the same. You end up giving more support than getting it.
Right.
So finding that mastermind type thing, I think, is an ideal.
You're making, and we can talk about this offline, the three of us, but I think we should create, in that communication platform we're launching for all clients, we should probably create an actual men's mental health or awareness group within that and figure out what that might look like. It's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Because, Ron, to your point, I think you're right. I think you're spot on. Because as the two of you are talking, I'm thinking, okay, there's lots of those groups out there. But Todd, it sounds like you may have found one you were working with, but do they actually talk to business owners? Like, is it a group of business owners sharing what are different struggles than just other people? Not that business owners are better or worse, but they're different struggles, right? So, like, no different than there's probably a parenting one.
Yeah. The people that are struggling the most that join those groups. So then you come in and they're like, well, what's wrong with you? Why are you here?
Yeah.
You don't need us.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's different struggle for sure.
Yeah, I think there's that old adage, the work-life balance, right? And for a lot of us, we think that that means at work with the uniform on and at home with the uniform off. And I think if we broke that down and said, no, there's got to be at least three stages. There's, at work with the uniform on, at home with the work uniform off, and, the dad hat on and the spouse hat on. And then there's also a third piece to that balance, and don't forget about it because it's easy. It's the one most easiest overlooked, which is the social network that allows you to unpack some of these things from the other two items in the balance.
For sure. Absolutely. Sorry, I'm now thinking a good coping mechanism, and maybe this is why there's the phrase out there, the bad dad jokes. Maybe dad jokes are meant to be a coping mechanism.
You may not be wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
They're just there to lower expectations so that we don't have to be the source of humor as well. It's more the source of groaning.
Kid's favorite word. Oh, dad. It's not funny.
That's it.
Sorry, someone said earlier, and I want to zip back to this, is I think back to business owners. What I have noticed is male business owners have a harder time accepting help, right? There's the whole ego thing gets in the way. So case in point, male business owners, from what I have seen, have a harder time accepting, like, say, a business coach. And it's the ego thing, right? And maybe part of that is this conversation's kind of bringing to light is because men always think they got to have the solution. It's really hard for men, I'm generalizing, but to feel like they're the one that needs to find the solution. Like they don't have the solution, I got to ask for help. Generally speaking, they're probably not wired that way, which is not a good thing. It's great to, I think it's great to want to look for solutions and provide help. It's awesome. But sometimes many times we're not going to have the solution ourselves. I shouldn't say sometimes because it's probably more than sometimes. But yeah, being able to look for help, where I'm noticing women will sign up with a business coach with less resistance than men. And it's probably because they don't have that ego in the way if they always have to have the solution. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, well, back to the early days of not having GPS and navigation in your car.
I know where you're going.
Was it a man that would pull over and ask for directions, or was it a woman that would pull over and ask for directions? And I think, I don't know how the statistics go, but the way the joke used to go is that men wouldn't pull over. They just keep going. Just keep going. You'll eventually get there.
I'll figure it out. I know what I'm doing.
So, to your point, it's likely the same sort of effect.
Yeah, 100%.
It's the fake it till you make it thing. And too many people think that they're going to just fake their way through and get there without help. And I also agree with the stereotypical, because we're very much talking stereotype there with that map or directions issue, Todd. The stereotypical, which becomes societal expectations of what a man can or should know, when he should or should not ask for help, and it really holds us back.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, Ron, you brought up a friend, which is super sad, lost brothers. You said brothers, right? Or
yeah, well,
brothers,
friends that
friends.
he would refer to as brothers. Yes.
So it does bode the question, and if either of you have some advice or both of you have some advice on this, but so wives, girlfriends, fiancés, whatever, kids, family members, what do we think some signs that they could look for are, because it's hard, men bottle stuff up, right? So it's hard to see the signs. So what are some signs they could look for to notice, like, hey, there's somebody that might be in trouble? Because I think suicide rates in men are higher than women. And I think probably male business owners might be a reasonably high rate, relatively speaking, to other types of people. So for prevention, what are some signs people could look for that?
Well, One of the things that I notice first off is if somebody's looking absolutely haggard and beaten down, they're probably facing something that they need some help through. Uh, the other angle that I think about is if somebody that's been diligent has started to care less, that would be a sign that you want to watch for.
Yeah, I would agree with Ron, and then I would add to that, um, for certain withdrawing and, heading off to, your own space where you can get some quiet for a little bit. Oftentimes, I've been there where you think, I need some alone time, some quiet time where I can, try to process and figure everything out without the noise of anything else bothering me. So, I'd retreat off and try to find alone time when, in fact, what I needed was some networking time with a different type of group where I could listen and then actually relate to some of those struggles and probably do some learning and sharpen that part of my sword, which was starting to get dull for me. I wasn't sharpening my sword mentally on how I functioned, and I needed a network of people to do that with.
So did you find in a group like that, like you're making me think, like, generally speaking, for people to become good at something, I don't know if that's the right word, but you need to learn the knowledge, like the theory, we'll call it, right? Whatever it is, a sport or anything, you got to learn kind of the theory first, but then you got to actually put in your reps, so to speak, right? So maybe what I'm hearing, would it be true that by, say, joining a group like that or having even just having a small group of friends, even if it's one or two that you can talk with, and you're sharing experiences, that's kind of like putting reps in, right? Like I don't know if the right word is living vicariously, but you're experiencing the experience without having to experience it yourself because someone else is sharing what they went through or they're going through. So it kind of feels like you're going through it, if that makes sense. I don't know if that would be part of the benefit there.
Yeah, exactly. Or you get to learn from the mistake before it happens to you. So you see somebody going through it, they just got mud in their face and it hurt. And you were 4 steps behind them, and that was about to happen to you. And you can probably make some
Right.
corrections to your course before you get there, and maybe prevent mud in your face and learn, from somebody else's. But yeah, taking advantage of other people's situations to help improve yours. And I think if the group is like-minded, it won't be seen as a bad thing of taking advantage of somebody's circumstances, but learning from them for sure is important. And I was going to say, for me, an important thing for me that I've been doing recently is that, despite my business background and my business focus, I've made it a real priority that I need to involve myself in something that consumes me on a day-to-day basis that's outside of family and outside of business focus, that gives me a reason, to get up and to do things. So I'm a paid on call firefighter in my hometown now. So I show up, and put my uniform on, and I go and train with other firefighters, and we respond to emergency situations and with other firefighters. And I get to, it's almost like the diesel therapy on the tractor, but I get to shift out of who I am at home and who I am during my business hours. And I get to shift into something that allows my mind to focus and do an activity that, A, it brings me satisfaction, but B, it throws me into working with a team of people that have like-minded goals and a very
Right.
supportive team in fire for sure, because the team trains on supporting each other. The whole system exists because it's a supportive work environment where, in order for the scenario to end well, the team needed to function really well together as a team. And so that for me has been a great distraction from home life or business life, and to put something in the middle as a buffer. I've found that works really well for me. And some people use sport. Some people use, there's all kinds of different avenues, but that's been a lifesaver for me.
Yeah, great idea. I guess that's actually why maybe, I mean this to be kind of funny, but not really, is maybe golf's always kind of fit in that slot, because good luck mastering golf if you're not doing it full time. So it's a never ending obsession to pursuit.
Now, I've golfed with
Yeah,
you.
it's a really good point.
I've golfed with you, and I wouldn't necessarily say that the people golfing with you are supportive and understanding of the mistakes that you're making on the golf course. Because I think we're always in the background in the cart behind you laughing at the last shot that you just made.
Right. Yeah, totally.
But
Yeah, it's a good point.
yeah, it brings up an interesting conversation in terms of what those activities are. I mean, having a group of guys around you is awesome. But if that group of guys around you means that you're always going out and drinking
Yeah.
heavily, maybe not the best way to get through depression or anxiety or things like that. They say physical activity is probably the most underrated antidepressant. So doing something physical, doing something that's uplifting, like your firefighting taught. I think that making those right choices in how you spend time with those friends is going to be important too.
Yep. Bang on.
Yeah, good call. I think another thing is probably, like, as coaches, we see this. So again, we're talking about men here, but men will bottle the stress and frustrations and that load up. And then how do they talk to their spouse about it? Like, like it doesn't come up all the time, but it comes up frequent enough that, clients will bring it up, right? Especially like male clients, they'll bring up like, how do I, they're in a situation, they're a new client, they've come to us, they got to turn their business around, which comes with some tough decisions they got to make, comes with maybe in the early stages, like, they may have to take 6 months and roll their sleeves up and carve an extra 10 hours of personal time out to work on stuff because they got to put stuff in place. So there might come some sacrifices that got to happen. And they've already got this situation where the family's financially stressed. And then they got to go home and sit down with their spouse and say, okay, well, I know we're already like this, but, I'm working with this, say, business coach, and we have a plan to fix it. However, it's going to come with some sacrifices short term, right? Like those conversations happen, actually, I said earlier, not that often. They happen a lot with new clients and their male. Those conversations happen because there has to be sacrifices. Any recommendations on, like, what do you guys think about that? Because that's hard, right?
Well, it's hard to get a spouse that doesn't necessarily understand the numbers and certain aspects of business to buy in, because they just want to say, oh, you handle that because I trust you. I don't want to learn it. So if you find somebody that's going to say, okay, listen, I don't necessarily have to be an expert here, but if you walk me through some of this so that I understand where we're at, that kind of support makes a world of difference.
Right. So in other words, show them a little bit of the game so they're more accepting and understanding and, say, supportive of tougher times when you got to step up and do that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I'm not great at this. And I've got somebody here at home that would agree with me that I'm not great at it. So
we're not talking about your dog here, right?
Yeah, I am not talking about my dog. But I think the process of at least sharing the information and saying, listen, it's not good at the moment, but I have a plan. I think at least framing it like that, it's not great at the moment. I have a plan. I'm working with a coach on the plan to get through it. It may take some sacrifice. I think unpacked that way is the beginning to getting some understanding on it for sure. Personal sacrifice is not easy to swallow, whether you're the person that's stuck in the muck or whether you're the person that is pulled into the muck with the other one. Personal sacrifice is not great. But when there's a plan and you need to work through that plan to get unstuck, then that's the most important realization, I think.
Yeah. I think a good tool that we do with clients is, it's weird, but in the very first meeting, we go through understanding financials, so we're on the same page with them. But then there's a little exercise at the end they take home with their spouse to say, go build a personal financial budget with your spouse. Like, go home, like what's revenue and expenses and all that look like in the household, so that I don't think many families do that. Like, actually sit down and figure out financially what they want life to look like and what they're prepared to do to get there, because that's a big question too. But that exercise has been great because I see, they go home, they get to talk about it. It opens up the conversation in the family, and then they can come back and then say, hey, we're all on the right page. We're prepared to do this, and boom, they can go off and do it. Because without that step, like, a business owner wants to go make these changes, but they're being pulled, like they're going in different directions with their spouse, where that exercise allows them to get together and say, okay, we're going to go in that direction together, and agree what period of time they're prepared to sacrifice some time, whatever it is. Yeah, I think it's important. And again, it gets a dialogue going, which then allows them, they can get together every year and do that exercise, right? And keeps them on the same page, same path. And together they can decide, do they want to alter that path? And that's fine. That's, a family's choice.
It's a good way of bringing the business goals into the household goals. Because otherwise, the person that's not in the day-to-day operation of the business just sees the business goals as, that's his thing, not
Right.
how it ties into the household.
Yeah, I was going to say, Greg, that must be in the manual that most people don't get when they start a family. Here are the discussions you should have with your family annually, monthly, daily, those sorts of things. So I agree with you. I think it would be a rare instance where people actually have those meaningful conversations with their family and plan, build goals, build budgets, talk about, how to chart the course to get there.
And again, in our curriculum, that's step one. What we're talking about is the very first step. Apparently they skipped this step and told me they didn't skip this step. They did the step, but they didn't do it with their wife, or he didn't do it with his wife. And I didn't know that. So fast forward, we're 6 months in, and things are turned around. They're looking really good. Money's coming in, but it's taken some time sacrifice. And he said to me the other day, like, my wife, has a problem in the business right now because she feels like I'm cheating on her with the business. Like, and it wasn't meant to be a funny comment. It was meant to be like, I'm like, it's not good. And that's how the wife felt. And they have a kid. And I said, well, when we started the exercise about the personal budget, didn't you do it together with your wife? He's like, no, she didn't have time. And I'm like, well, if you had started doing that with her day one, she probably would have felt a lot differently the last 6 months, or at least the two of you would have agreed on what you're prepared to do as a family to get to this point where you're getting to. So it is a super important step.
I think at the moment, we're probably talking more about businesses that have the family as shareholders, right? So we're talking about a sole proprietor or a small business owner that, has to be accountable down the road to his family because that's his next in command. I think if we blew this up a little bit bigger and said, all right, let's talk about, Microsoft for a minute, and, the shareholders and the board of directors and all of the layers of governance that are between the person running the business and the outcomes of the business. I think, large business ends up having many times, a stratification of governance that's layered in there, whether they're shareholders or board of directors and that sort of thing. And those systems, that stratification keeps the business and the goals and the budgeting and all of that on track so that it happens by default.
Yeah.
When it's just you running the business and you're going home to talk to your family and you're not faced with another layer of vetting and you're also not sharing it with your family, then there is no vetting going on for your business. And I guess if you put a coach in there, somebody that is, going to speak for the business, be the business keeper, and keep an eye on that business with you, then all of a sudden maybe you have that accountability built in there. But without that, you could probably go for many years and not have to talk about the accountability side of your business. You could be pulling money out of your business, feeding the family needs. Everything's fine. We don't need to budget because this business is keeping us, feeding our lifestyle, so to speak. And then all of a sudden at the end, you may realize that because of the way that you ran it, your business now looks as though it's not worth anything to go ahead and sell it because the plan wasn't there, and you've robbed your business of its value because of the way that you used it to support your lifestyle. And I would bet, I don't know the statistics on this, but I'll bet, I'll bet they're hard to find. I would bet that many business owners are using their business as the slave that feeds their lifestyle, and they believe that that's what is the best thing to do, except when they get to the end and they're hoping that they can sell it and use it as a valuable asset to sell and pocket that cash to retire on. They realize that it's not going to be worth near as much as they'd hoped, or they don't expect it's going to be worth anything at the end. It was just more something that fed their lifestyle, through the years of living.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It actually makes me think, again, back to the whole men's mental health awareness is one. We've talked about lots of things. Business owners they got the stress on their shoulders. They feel it all. One big thing, and what you just said, Todd, made me think of this, is a massive solution to getting rid of the stress is actually fix the freaking business. Like if you fix the business, so two things, I guess. So stage one would be it's not financially stressful. So fix the business so it's not financially stressful. Then a lot of that goes away, right? And then the second piece would be if you get used to kind of the grind to fix it, to make it profitable, then there's a second learning experience, which is how am I systemizing the business and earning the right to not have to be there 60, 80, 90 hours a week. Like, because that's the thing, right? They get to a point where it's like grind. So it's a kind of business like Todd, you just said, the grind, not making much. And then we'll come in, help them fix it. They fix it. They start making some good money, but they're so used to it's like a fight or flight kind of thing. They're so used to I got to grind the whole time to continue to make, when in fact, they do get to a point where they've earned the right to systemize a business, put people in place, still have it grow profitably, and then have a normal life where then they can take up hobbies, spend more time with their family, travel, do those things and make great money.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that can be just as hard of a mental shift as the first part, which is grind it out to figure out how to fix it.
Well, sure, you've been beaten with a stick, all that time, realizing that the other shoe could drop any minute here and that
Right.
disaster could strike. It's hard to bury that instinct of always needing to be on guard and ready for that shoe to drop. So, yeah, I think it would take a long time to deprogram. And, for sure, I'm still deprogramming, from a position of where I was running the company. I'm HR and finance and housekeeping and everything. I'm still adjusting to that, and it takes a long time to kind of come back down to ground level.
Right.
I'm glad you brought that up, Greg, because when you talked about the sacrifices that sometimes need to happen the first few months that you're working with a coach to get things turned around, we sometimes have to look forward beyond that we're creating some owner independence here. And instead of the 60 hours that we've had to work to get this back on track, now we're looking at a 30-hour week. And how does that change how you feel, how your relationships are with your children or your spouse, and even having that time to get out to the gym or do something active to get your headspace back?
You're making me think along those same lines. So if, let's say, business owner, super stressed, not making money, whatever that looks like, probably if they don't have all the things we kind of talked about today already in their life, then they get in their own head and they start focusing on the wrong things, right? They focus on glass half empty, right? So, everything they think about, it's like the thought goes to a negative first. It's like, oh, that can't work because, or I won't be able to do that right because, or if I try that out, it's going to fail because, or if I hire that person, they're probably not going to work out because, or if I go meet with that affiliate, it's not going to work because, like, the brain's always going to be on that negative thing because they're used to being beat up. I think there's a thing with mental health that, like, I know when any of us get a client that's in that situation, a really good tactic is to light that fire. And I don't know if the right word is get them a little bit pissed off, but get them a little competitive and mad and get them focused on the work they got to go do. And it kind of doesn't become stressful, right? If you think about sports, great athletes, you can see in the moments that count, like, they want the ball, they want the puck, they want the responsibility, right? And they focus on it. And they don't think or stress about how it's going to fail. Like, pro athletes won't make the pros unless their mentality is when they hit a situation, they attack it and they focus on it. And that actually doesn't become stressful, right? That becomes almost like working out. Like, it becomes like a positive thing. So it can be the same in business. Like, I get it. Business owners in this shitty situation, but if we can flip their mindset to attack mode for just a burst, a period of time, which might be a month, it might be 6 months. It depends on the situation they're in. And then it gets them out of that pit and takes those financial stresses away, which can be super hard for sure. And then our next goal or trick is, Ron, like you just said, and then we got to put them scalable and get them systemized so that they can back off back to a normal work week, or even maybe less than a normal work week. And then it removes that what might be called working too many hours stress. But what scares me a lot of times is when I hear people say, and they're in a shitty financial situation with their company, and they're like, oh, I read this book and it said I need to flip a switch tomorrow and have work-life balance. And I'm like, be really careful about how literal you take that advice, because if that person's financially not doing well and they flip I'm going to work 30 hours a week and go travel and whatever, that's great. But if your business continues to fail, man, stress levels are like going to go through the roof. And if you lose your business, that's a whole new ballgame of stress. That's just unless someone's already lived that, they have no idea what they're in for with that.
You're going to get a lot more time for life and a lot less time for work if you keep that up.
And then you can't pay your bills and you got to lose your house and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, talking about that switch, that flipping that switch, and professional sports, and how, pro athletes understand how to maintain the focus and flip that switch and recover from some bad plays. I don't know when we're going to air this podcast or if we're live, but yesterday's hockey game, Las Vegas and Colorado, they went into the change room at the end of the first period, and Colorado was leading 3-0. And Vegas came out of that change room like a bunch of pros and played the second period and finished it up tied 3-3. And they came out and despite being underwater, despite being against the wall, put together what they needed to do, and they owned the second period. And that's, to your point, come out with a plan, deal with it like a pro, and get the momentum swinging the other direction.
And I'll bet if you asked every one of those players today, I'll bet coming onto the ice in the second period, if you asked them, were you stressed? Their answer is probably no. They probably didn't. That second period when they were down 3-0 probably didn't feel stressful because they're pros. They get it.
They're focused on the job.
Yeah. And then it's not stressful, right? And I love you said that, because obviously I've never been able to find a statistic on this. And actually I'll bet with AI now you could probably find this statistic, but I guarantee you in professional sports, I'm not talking amateur, but in amateur sports, people are more willing to mentally give up. But in pro sports, they don't give up so easy. So I'd be willing to bet if you took every pro sports game and said, when it's kind of a reasonably big lead, like define what a big lead is in that sport. But when there's a big lead, I'll bet more than half the time teams close that gap versus let it get extended. Because they understand, like they don't take that as a stressful, like amateur athletes will get stressed and kind of give up mentally, where pro athletes will fire that trigger. And those gaps, from what I've seen in my life, those gaps close more often than they spread when there's already a big gap to start with. And those people aren't stressed. They're just going after it. They got a job to do.
Isn't there a saying that the most dangerous lead in hockey is a 5-1 or a 5-0 lead?
Yeah, right? Or 3-0 after period 1 last night.
Or that.
Yeah. But yeah, for sure. Like there's many cases. It's crazy watching that. Like basketball, you always see these big leads and all of a sudden they're down to the final 2 minutes and it's like within 6 or 8 points. Or football, It happens all the time too. All of a sudden, like a game will be out of hand the whole game and you have 5 minutes to go and all of a sudden they're 1 or 2 scores away. It's like, how'd that happen? And I guarantee you the team that fought from behind wasn't stressed. Like that wouldn't be a word they would use to define what they were going through. And I guess that's my point. I don't think those people would use the word stressed as one of the descriptors of what they were going through at that moment. And that tells you something, right? It doesn't need to be stressful.
Commitment. They're committed to their goal, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a raw motivation speech in the dressing room. It's actual commitment to the end, the cup, the Grey Cup, the Stanley Cup, whatever you're shooting for.
There's another good piece of advice for anybody feeling stress in business. Stop being motivated. Be committed, like you just said. Because that motivation's going up and down with results. They have a bad day, I feel shitty. They have a good day, things are going to be great. And they have a bad month, boo-hoo. We're committed, like you're saying, they'll run through brick walls. And that's, like when you're committed to something, it's not stressful. I think, you got to come up with you got to be committed, number one. So that goes back to, we talked earlier about people got to create a personal budget. That makes them more committed to do what they got to do in their business. They got to work with their spouse to get on the same page. And then they got to build a plan. Absolutely. That's
last year's World Series. There's probably a couple games in there where there was some, 10-0 losses that had the pros. Well, they came back in the next game, right? They came back committed and ran through a brick wall the next game. They just had a momentary lapse.
There's so many instances in that damn World Series last year that could have gone either way. That was just, I've watched a lot of sports in my life. I've never seen something with so many instances where if that instant went the other way, the World Series would have gone the other way.
Yeah.
Like so many in one championship series. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Now, obviously I say that as a Blue Jays fan. So people are going to say, you're a Blue Jays fan. Fuck. Stupid ass Dodgers. Them and the Yankees can go stick their head in a tub of water. Yeah, this whole sports commitment thing. Like I think we all know in sports, and everybody's played sports to different levels, but if anybody has any competitive fire in their body, which generally speaking, an entrepreneur has that competitive fire, right? Like you got to be a competitive person to some degree if you're going to be an entrepreneur. So I think with sports, we all know, okay, I want to win the championship. And to win the championship, I got to win in the playoffs. And to win the playoffs, I got to have a great win-loss record. And to get a great win-loss record, I got to have great statistics, like, goals for versus against, or passing percentage, or number of sacks in a game, or 3-point shooting percentage, or whatever those statistics are. We all know that with sports. It's like super obvious. And the more clear the team and athletes are about, we want to get to that championship and win the trophy, that drives the commitment through everything to get there, and they're willing to run through brick walls. And I think it's exactly the same in business. I think that championship becomes personally what I want from my business with the exit plan. So what's that? What do we want the company to be worth is your championship trophy. And then the win-loss record on the way there is your profit loss statement every year, right? Like a good month is a win, or a good year is a win. A bad month or a bad year is a loss. So you need a good win-loss record. And then to make that win-loss record good, you got key statistics. So average transaction and conversion rates and number of transactions and all those fun numbers. And if all of those are clearly laid out, which is exactly what we do in our curriculum, by the way, if all those are clearly laid out, then I think anyway, like sports, like we've been talking about, an athlete gets into that situation and it's not stressful. They're going for it and they're following their clear plan. It's exactly the same in business. A business owner can go for it. Like all three of us have been in situations where we've been in difficult business situations. But like I just find in life, when I'm in those situations, if I lay that plan out, just like we just said, I just attack it and it's not stressful, even though it can be exhausting, but I wouldn't call that stressful. Kind of like the other day I played pickleball for the first time. I played with really good players and it was awesome. It was my very first time playing. We played for 2.5 hours and none of that was stressful, but I walked away exhausted. That's a workout. Like I was like a puddle of water and the thing was done. So to me, that's different. That's not I don't think that's stressful. I think it's just, it can be like a hard workout. It could be exhausting, right? Or running a marathon. So I think there's some merit to say to people when they're stressed and it's financial stress with the business, or lack of systems, so you can't rely on people's stress with a business. If you follow that train of thought and you put that plan in place, attacking that plan doesn't become stressful. It just becomes a hard workout, which is okay. Sometimes that's healthy, actually, right?
So many businesses, though, don't even think about that. Business owners, they'll start a business, they'll buy a business and just hope for the best. They don't have that end in mind. And we always talk about starting with the end in mind. You've got the 10-year plan, the exit planning tool. That's a great way to put that in mind. But just building out things like your organizational chart. You may fill every role when you start, but you've got a chart that you can look at that have some hope that another name is going to fill that box.
Right? Yeah. You're working and earning the right to afford another name to fill that box, which is awesome. Yeah. That's not stressful. That's just going to the gym and lifting a lot of weights or sprinting or whatever. Yeah. Todd, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I think there's very few athletes, that are performing at a reasonable level that don't have a coach or a mentor that is helping them get there. And if we start talking about higher level sports, then for certain, there's going to be a head coach, there's going to be a defensive coach and an offensive coach and a special teams coach or whatever it is. You're going to have coaches in there that are helping guide the professional players who are experts at their skill. They're experts in their field. They may hold the world record in their skill, but they've still got a coach that is helping to keep them on track and move them to the next level so that they can play as a better part of the team. And Ted Lasso is one of my favorite shows. It makes me feel good.
I haven't seen it yet. You're talking about that.
Yeah, it's really good. So Ted Lasso is one of my favorite shows because, you've got Coach Beard in there and you've got Coach Lasso and Nate the Great and all of these guys that are adding their pieces to the team. And then all of a sudden, the ownership of the team decides to bring in this psychologist and add a psychologist to the team. And, Lasso's like, woo, psychologist. I'm not sure we need that sort of thing. I've got the coaching thing going down, but they add a different level of coaching to the team to solve some of the problems that aren't getting solved. And I think, it's a really good reminder for us to realize that we're playing a competitive sport while we run a business here. We're keeping score. There's a scoreboard. There's a bunch of players on the field. We all have our own role. This is not just a single athlete activity that we're doing here. It's a multifaceted game that we're playing. And if we think we can play that game without coaching and direction and therapists and all of those sorts of things to get us through, man, we are the problem that's standing in the way of success.
For sure. Really good point.
Ted Lasso. Start watching it tonight.
Yeah. I'm going to add it to my list. Is that the one? Did I see a commercial where they're playing darts And he
Yeah.
starts throwing like left-handed or something, then he switched to right-handed or whatever and kicks his ass. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
He's funny. What's the actor's name? I always forget. He's been in some funny movies.
Forever to me, it's Ted Lasso.
Nice. Okay, awesome discussion. I hope it helps some people with perspective, men that own businesses. I really hope it helps them with perspective and dealing with stress, because I'm sure a very large percentage are dealing with stress. Before we do a wrap up, our producer likes to give us a couple of questions to answer, like personal ones. First question. We know men often process emotions differently, sometimes through irritability or escapist behavior rather than saying, I'm sad. How do you prefer people in your life to check in on you when they notice you're carrying a lot on your shoulders? How do you prefer they check in on you?
Well, to be fair, nobody wants to be told that they're being a jerk. So
Right.
if you're being a jerk, and maybe that's the case, so just come and say, hey, do you want to go for a walk? You want to run out and do some chores? Do you need to talk? There's something bugging you. Just come and ask me, but don't make it about how I'm acting. That's always tough for a man to hear, that they're just being a jerk.
Right. Because it's never true.
No, it's usually true. Doesn't help the situation.
Yeah, it's good advice. Great advice. Todd.
Yeah, I get the impression that you're having a rough day, and it's not like you to really talk about it, but maybe we should walk and talk and go get this off your shoulders so that we can carry on. So, I think to Ron's point, being centered out as being, grouch or bad attitude, or, always coming home angry, and having that being thrown in your face on top of everything that you went through that day. Lesson number 1, burn some diesel before you go home. Lesson number 2, maybe address me with something a little softer than, hey, jerk, settle down.
I'm going to give 2 answers. My first one's a joke, but it would be, hey, let's go do this task together, like chop wood or whatever. And then I'd say, yeah, can you do that for me while I go? I don't think that would go over very well. Yeah, you both had great answers there. I concur with both. It's usually got to be someone you have that relationship with, that you can sort of trust has your best interest at heart, and you respect with that. And if they just came in and said, hey, want to go for a insert activity, whatever it is, and then just start a conversation. If they started with, how are things going, in this area of your life, or hey, how's it going here? Or, have you been finding blah, blah, blah stressful, or whatever it is, and just start the conversation. Both of you said I agree, versus just coming in and going, hey, jerk face. It generally won't go over very well.
Yeah.
Also, I think depends on the personality type.
Yeah.
Okay, question number 2, and I'll go reverse order this time. Todd, I'll go you first. Did you have a situation in your life where you were at your lowest point ever, and what did you do to get out of it?
Yeah, for sure. I've had a couple of real lows where the dump of business and circumstance comes down on you, and it feels like £1,000,000. And it's just like, this is probably the end. It's just not gonna get worse than this, and this is the end. This is what the bottom feels like. And when that happens, it can be a really lonely place. So I think, without getting into the details on it, the way out of it, 100% for sure, is a supportive family, a supportive spouse. That's important. But also that earlier I talked about that circle of friends, or that network where you can go and share and be in a safe room where you're not talking to your business people, you're not talking to your family people, you're talking to a room of people that have problems, and they've talked about them with you before. And having that group of friends or that network to talk about things with, it gets you through to a spot where you can see the light again and start crawling back out of the hole and rebuilding it, and deciding that okay, if that's what the bottom feels like, let's not head that far down again, if we can help it. But more importantly, learn the lesson that the way out of it is using that group of people and working towards the light again and working through it. That for me was the exercise that was most beneficial, was finding where the light was to come back out of it, because you could spend a lot of time in the dark not coming out of that hole. In fact, plenty of people do. The dark place is talked about a lot, but for me, it was finding the right people to get lifted out of the hole.
Good point. Ron, how about you?
Well, there's been a lot of things that have happened over 25 years in business that take you back. But the most recent, most dramatic would be when I was selling my business and one deal fell through. It didn't necessarily fall through, but they came back with a lowball offer after our letter of intent. And it was a bit of a kick in the gut. Well, a lot of people
Plays tricks in your mind, right?
Well, it does. And, I think that the intention there was to get us so far down the hole that we have no choice but to accept that reduced offer,
Right.
which I didn't. It was hard. My goodness, it was hard to not accept that offer, but it was hard to just have to deal with that kick in the gut. It was a real blow in terms of where I was at, because business was successful but challenging in different ways, and I just needed out. So my saving grace was my spouse, because I wasn't reaching out to friends. I was kind of digging that hole and hiding, and my spouse was there for me and probably dealt with some levels of anger or jerk face that she didn't deserve, but helped me get through it.
That's cool. I'd say mine is way back in 2010 or whatever. Economy shifted, whatever, and we were about to lose our business. The bank called, and that's just like crash. And it was actually my uncle that called. He literally talked to me that night. I got the news from the bank on the Friday. He called me Friday night, said, "I'm driving to your office. I'll drive into town." He met me because he'd been through it, give or take 10 years or 15 years earlier. And this is the best advice I ever got to do with business, ever. He said, "You're about to go through something that 99% of people will run away from. They'll fold tent and just run. Everybody in your life's going to tell you to run from this because it's going to be too stressful." He said, "Look at it this way. If you fight it and figure it out and win, then you win. But if you don't, you'll get an education that you literally can't go to school and buy." He says, "You won't be able to go buy this education you're about to get." So he said his 2 cents was, "I'll help you tonight with a big picture plan, like the steps. And then you got to go do the work all weekend. And he says, you got to literally sleep here." He's being sarcastic, but I fucking slept in the office I slept there Friday, Saturday night. And I went home and showered Sunday night, came back Monday morning, met the bank. They bought the plan, and he was dead right. And I never found that whole battle I went through for a couple of years, I never found it stressful. It was exhausting, but it wasn't stressful. So having somebody in their life like that, who's kind of been there, done that, and helps you realize any situation that can be stressful, if you flip it around, it could be exhausting, but it can be an unbelievable learning experience. And it's not stressful anymore because you're attacking something, you know what you want, you got a plan. So yeah, having people like that in your life, like the two of you just talked about too, it's huge. No question. Okay. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Awesome. I think there was some great tidbits in there for people, and I hope they got a lot out of that. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg.
Okay.
And Todd, always good to connect with you again.
Thanks for listening to the More Profit, Less Stress podcast. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform and leave a comment or review, as it helps with the algorithm. To learn more about us and what we do, check out our website. Until next time, go make it happen.